Alright, hello once again. Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. I've been going through a series of video presentations based on the two textbooks that are used for the Rankin Technical College AWD, that's Application Web Development 1000 Web Development Technologies course. So far I've gone through all 20 of these chapters for Murox, HTML5, and CSS3 4th edition. And in the other book that we use, Murox, JavaScript, and jQuery 3rd edition, I did a little bit out of order. I did chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then I skipped 6 and went and did 7 because I wasn't sure if I'd have time for 6. I'll have to break this up probably over more than one lecture. So that's where I am right now. So, how to script the DOM with JavaScript. To me, possibly, well, for sure, in the JavaScript section of this book, this is the hardest chapter. Why? Because it's the most all-encompassing. All right, we talk about the DOM, or the document object model, in here, and how you work with it. Basically, anytime you create a web page, a document object model is created. And you can manipulate anything on that document object model, all right, that has an ID. So you'll notice we've created this. And you'll notice the form has an ID, the email address has an ID, the error message has an ID. Anything with an ID, we can go and use that document.getElementById function, work with it, and actually write some code. Being able to do what's called walk the DOM, which means go through the entire web page and be able to programmatically manipulate anything with an ID, is about as strong as it gets in JavaScript. You'll notice that you've got nodes here that are in blue, all right, and the green ones are also nodes, but they're referred to as leaf nodes because they don't go any further. They got some text in them. So here's some of the stuff you'll use with a DOM. By no means is this an all-encompassing list. I should mention, don't want to get off on too big of a tangent here, but I should mention that if we go over here and you go out to w3schools.com, all right, you've got to spell it right though. And if you do that and you go out to tutorials, you will find tutorials on a lot of different stuff, okay, including learning the DOM. So that's a super good way to get started with this stuff. All right, but some of the stuff that you might end up using includes the document, node, element nodes, attributes, and text. Some properties, node value, parent node, child node, first child, last child, next element sibling. Now, the example that they're going to give in here, and I thought they'd show it, but I guess they're not going to, is previously what we did in here. What we did in here previously is we wrote this with just pure JavaScript. We didn't worry about setting up IDs and the like in here. All right? Now we will. So again, we can come in here and work with this stuff programmatically. Again, I can't imagine that you're going to look at this and it's going to make a lot of sense to you right now. It'll make much more sense when we go over it. But it says there how to get the text out of an element. This is one way of doing it. How to set the text. All right, and you'll notice here we've got email error dot first child dot node value. It's on the right-hand side of the equal sign. So we are copying its value to a variable. Here, it's on the left-hand side of an equal sign. So we are setting its value. All right. Here we're setting it without using an ID. So some of the stuff that you could work with in here, we already looked a little bit at get element by ID, and that was element singular by ID. Then you've got three things that say get elements. So these can and often do return multiple things. They return an array of tag names, or an array of elements by that name, or an array of things by that class name. All right? So methods that you commonly use with these, has attribute to see if something actually is there. Get attribute, so you can access the attribute. Set attribute, so you can actually change or what's called mutate the attribute. And remove attribute. You want to remove something. What you are able to do with this, putting it in a nutshell, is you can manipulate a web page programmatically while the page is up and running. So you can add things to the web page, you can change existing things from the web page, you can remove existing things from the web page. And in a nutshell, that's what we're talking about in here. Here would be a way we could get all anchor tags, for example. All right? And again, I don't want to sit and read this stuff to you, so I'm going to go for a while. All right, when it seems like it'd be a natural place to break, we'll break, and I'll pick it up here next time. So, getting things, setting things, etc. So when you get something, it's as though it's the first day of class, and a student walks in, and I say to the student, "Hello, what's your name?" And they say, "It's Mary." All right, that is getting her first name. If it turns out that I look through my list of people in the class and I have, let's say, 6 people named Mary, and I say to Mary, "Hey, I've got 6 people in this class named Mary. Would it be possible for me to refer to you by your middle name?" She said, "Sure." And I said, "What's your middle name?" And she says, "Ann." Okay, then I said, "From now on, you're Ann in this class." That is setting something. So when you get something, you're accessing it. It's a read-only. You're not changing it when you get it. When you set it, you are making a change to it. If somebody would drop from a class, so they're not there anymore, I could remove them from the class. That's removing an attribute. The URL that they show right here is the URL for what's called the Document Object Model Hypertext Markup Language Specification. It's about as exciting as it sounds. It's written by technical writers who by and large do a fantastic job, but the stuff they write isn't very stimulating to read. All right. Here's some properties that you'll oftentimes work with that are explained in the DOM HTML specification. Okay, I'm not going to read any of them. I'll leave them out there for just a minute. There are things that by and large, these things we've already dealt with. These are things in here that we will deal with, that again, you're able to manipulate programmatically. Okay? How the DOM HTML spec can simplify your code. When you're learning the DOM, you're thinking there's no way this is simplifying anything, it's making it harder. But it'll oftentimes result in much less code, all right, that you can write. And that's what they're talking about in here. Here's an example. We looked earlier at that FAQ, frequently asked questions page. Here's an example. Notice that the plus signs that are here, when we clicked here on it, it changed to a minus sign, which means it's going to show us the answer. If we click over here, then this becomes a plus sign again. This information goes away, and the answer to this question will appear down here. And they show you too the associated code for that. So that's the HTML, and then the CSS, and then the key thing here is the JavaScript. Right. But what you're doing in there, and again, I don't expect that to totally make a whole heck of a lot of sense right now, but you're doing exactly what I said you're doing. All right. Here's a form in a browser. So what do we want to check in here? Well, we might want to check, let's say, 4 things. First, was there a value put in for the email address? Period. Second, is the value that was put in a validly formed email? Third, was there any kind of value put in for the first name? Fourth, it's a first name, was it just alpha only type of thing? So we can write HTML, all right. When we write this and we put in this information, we click this button, this is the kind of thing that gets sent to a server. So it's going to be sent to a file named join.php. The email address that's going to be sent is Grace. The %40 means at. So the Grace at yahoo.com, so that's what gets sent. And the first name is Grace. So you've got email address in here, that's one attribute. First name, that's one attribute. You can see they're both in yellow. They just put it like that so you can tell their attributes. And then after the equal sign for each is the value that goes with that. So when you're working with a form element, forms have names, actions, and methods. Forms are filled with different kinds of controls. For the name, if you want to be able to manipulate that again programmatically, you typically give it an ID. An action is typically you put in there post or get. Get is more like one of those accessors we talked about before. You're not changing anything. Post means you are changing it. It's like a setter. All right, and in fact, that's the method. Method is post or method is get. Action is, for instance, that would be to call this file right here. All right. Properties of text boxes, text areas, select object, that's the actual value that it has. So if I want to be able to grab the value, that's how I can do it. Or if I want to be able to set the value to the empty string, in this case, that's how I do it. With a radio button or a checkbox, we looked at these things back in the days of the HTML class. All right, remember radio buttons are for mutually exclusive events, so it's either on or off, or checkboxes. You can have several of them. They can none be on, some be on, all be on. All right, but you can check for the value. You can see whether or not it's even checked. Again, I'm not saying this totally is making sense, and I'm going through it quickly. Here is basically what will happen if you click the submit button or if you click the reset button. With controls, if I've got two controls, let's say I've got a first name and underneath it a last name. I type in Jeff for the first name and I then click in the last name. What happens is a blur event for the first name gets fired and a focus event for the second one gets fired. I can put code anywhere in there or nowhere in there. So I can say when I get a focus or a blur, when I click, when I double click, when I change something, when I select something, those are all places it is possible for me to add code. All right, here's taking a reset form, or I'm sorry, a registration form, and it's like probably you click the reset button or probably you click the submit button. And what do you do with it? Whatever it is you want to do with it. You can do things in onload, and that means when the form is loaded into memory. You're going to see this right here. This is a little confusing, all right? But we're going to do what are called register functions when we get to a certain point. And again, hopefully it'll make sense when we get to that point. Here again, we're adding JavaScript to validate our form, to make sure the entries we put in there, that there's something put in there or that what we want to have put in there is put in there. Quite often when you do this kind of thing, you'll put span tags over here that you'll initially make invisible. You make them red. You don't have to, but historically they're kind of red. I make mine in bold also, and I turn them on when there's an error that's found. So that's a span, and it's saying I want that color. I would also put like font weight bold in mine. All right, here's the JavaScript that goes along with that. We've got that use strict that we talked about earlier. We've got our alias here for our get element by ID. We've got what's called an anonymous function right here. It's got all this code in it. All right, we've got this reset. So if we click the reset button, this is what we want to have happen. We've got this on load, which says, hey, I am registering, saying that if I click the register, whatever it is, I want that function to run. When I click the reset form, I want that function to run. And when you start the program, I want that field to have the focus. All right. If you decide that while your program is running, you want to be able to write to the program, you can use inner HTML. You can literally use inner HTML to go in and write to a web page while the page is running. So you could ask a user, as an example, and this is a poor example, but it's the one I thought, what's your first name? I put in Jeff, and it comes back on the screen, hi Jeff. What's your favorite color? And I put in blue, and maybe it changed my background color to blue. I don't know, something like that. So here's another app that displays a list of images, pretty simple, and they're adding text to it. All right. Here's that same registration thing that we looked at earlier, but now what we're doing is we're cataloging all of the errors and we're putting them down below. And people, sometimes ask, well, which is better? Why do you do it this way? No, it's all, if you are creating a project, if you're part of a team, quite often somebody will tell you what they want, how they want it done. So some people may want their error messages over here. Some may want them on the bottom. Some may want them a different way. And again, I'm not going over the code. It's a little bit complex. We will go over it in class. Pardon me, I've got like a tickle in my throat. All right, so here's playing with that FAQ thing. Here's playing with more controls, enhancing our email list, making a temperature converter. These are all assignments that we're going to have in the Java class. All right. And that pretty much is it. So I didn't know if I could do this in one lecture or not. I did, and it's not that long even. But so what I have done right now, just so you know, is we have now gone over all 7 of these chapters. So when I come back and start on it again, I'm going to jump into the next section, because section 1 was all on JavaScript. Section 2 is all on jQuery. Section 3 is sort of a hodgepodge, because you can use number strings, dates, etc. in either one of these. All right. jQuery is a JavaScript library. So it allows you to kind of, it's kind of like, I've heard it explained as being JavaScript on steroids. In fact, tomorrow when I come in, since I've got these done, I may come in and very well do chapters 13, 14, 15, and 16, for example. 17 and 18 are very complex. But I might do these 4 chapters. Then come back and do these 5 chapters, and then end up with these 2. We'll see how it goes. All right? That's it for right now. See you soon.